Hi, everyone. Hi, and welcome to this webinar. Really pleased to have you here. Thank you for your patience. We just had a couple of technical issues. So just let people in. So let's see. So we're expecting Mary Foy, the MP, to join us this afternoon, but I think she's been held up. So I'm afraid I am going to be your substitute chair until we have Mary. So thank you so much for joining us. It'd be great to hear in the chat if you could let us know who you are, which organisation you're joining from. There will be an opportunity after we hear from our excellent panel to ask questions. So do use the Q&A function. I would appreciate if you could put any questions there. And just, a reminder that this is the launch of a new briefing from the Women's Budget Group and the Traveller Movement on intersecting socio-economic and structural inequalities faced by women and girls from Romani, Roma and Irish traveller communities. And we'll be putting a link to the report in the chat so you can find those. I should introduce myself. So my name is Erin Mansell. I am Interim Deputy Director at the UK Women's Budget Group and Head of External Affairs. And I'm just going to give you brief bios for all of our speakers and then hand over to them to go through their presentation. So we have Lord Marie O'Brien, who is an Irish traveller and the Women's Research and Development Officer at the Traveller Movement. Lord was one of the first in her family to complete high school and sixth form, and the first to attend university, where she graduated with a first-class degree in law and criminology from Roehampton University. Lords advocates for greater investment in culturally competent, tailored support for victim survivors from Romani, Gypsy and Irish traveller background, and leads on the Women's Empowerment Network, which is a group for Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish traveller women offering training and networking opportunities. Great to have you here, Lords. We have Olivia Morrison, who's the Head of Partnerships and Advocacy at the Traveller Movement. She is of Romani Gypsy heritage. Olivia oversees all the Traveller Movement's women's work and the work of the organisation's Equalities and Social Justice Unit. Olivia also leads on the organisation's PAN London strategic advocacy projects, in addition to Gypsy, Roma and Traveller History Month celebrations in June. She's also currently trained to become a qualified IDFA. We have Annalise Corcoran, who's a Community Development Officer at the Traveller Movement, and she focuses on fostering meaningful connections between community members and service providers, with a deep commitment to addressing the unique needs of Romani, Gypsy and Irish traveller communities. Annalise is currently involved in crucial mental health projects aimed at tackling the mental health and suicide crisis within these communities. And finally, we have our Emma Thackeray, who's from the Women's Budget Group, as Senior Research and Data Officer. And Emma joined us in August 2022 as a Research and Data Officer on the Local Data Project. After a decade running a tuition business and online education platform, she undertook a career change alongside an MA in Social Policy at the University of Birmingham. Emma has experience working on education, climate change and social policy research projects at Bangor University and the University of Birmingham, and has volunteered for a refugee charity and her local maternity voices partnership. So I think we're handing over first to Lord. So over to you, Lord, and the rest of us, I think we'll turn our videos off so that everyone can see you clearly.
Hi everyone, my name is Lord, and I'm the Women's Research and Development Officer at the Traveller Movement. Most of my work is based on women, and my own personal experience of education as well. That's why I thought I could speak more on education and the bulk sector and that. So first I want to say this piece of work is very important in improving the lives of Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish traveller women and girls. Olivia will speak to more about the key findings and the challenges in a little while, but I just want to focus on education and violence against women and girls first. So In the report, it does already say that many people from the Romani, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish Harbour communities do face a lot of barriers in terms of education. So there's a lot of bullying, racism, and exclusion, which often leave families to take their children out of school and put them into home education, as this is the only way they probably make their children feel safe. I know a traveller girl who loved school, but over time the bullying became like too much. Her parents eventually withdrew her to protect her, but now she has no qualifications. Sadly, this is not unusual for the communities. Many women and girls from our communities leave school without qualifications, which makes finding work and becoming financially independent very difficult for them. At the moment, schools do not record why children withdraw from elective home education. If schools recorded whether this was due to bullying, racism, or isolation, they could step in sooner and offer support to children and parents before children become completely disengaged and removed from mainstream education. There's often the assumption that not attending school is a cultural choice for travel families, but in reality, it's not the case. Many children and parents want them to stay in school, but they're pushed out because of racism, bullying, and feeling isolated. So I do think that mandatory reporting and follow-up of racist incidents is really important, as a clear reporting and proper follow-up would help make sure that children are not pushed out of school. Because the environment feels unsafe or anything like that, like just make it more of a comfortable environment for them. It's also important to look at the wider issues behind exclusions and low attainment, including the curriculum design and how teachers are trained to support children from different backgrounds. So I know traveller families whose children were labelled as like disruptive, and instead of being supported, they were placed in isolation rooms for the entire school day or excluded multiple times throughout the year. Parents are then left asking themselves, like, what is the point of me sending my child to school if they're not being taught, but instead they're removed from the classroom or excluded for a number of days. If these children had been supported rather than isolated and excluded, many parents probably would have not felt the need to withdraw their children from school. Also, a lot of parents and families are not provided with enough adequate support outside of when they're providing home education. So they usually have low literacy levels themselves, and they haven't got the proper resources, and there isn't that much support. So I do think there needs to be some additional support, like it said in the briefing as well. Like it is one of the next steps that needs to happen. Like there needs to be a lot more support for families who do choose to take the children out of school, because again, it's not their choice to take the children out of school. It is just because they've been pushed out of it. And really, as a parent, you would want what's best for your child. And if your child's being bullied and is not being supported fully in school, you're going to want to take them out and home educate themselves where they're safer. So there's a lot of barriers in education. And then with violence against women and girls, there is no reliable data on the prevalence of violence against women and girls within the Romani, Gypsy, Roma, Irish Harbour communities. What we do know is that from survivors is that they usually face heightened barriers to report abuse and access to support. So one of them is the mistrust in authorities. Many women are afraid to contact the police or safeguarding services because of previous discrimination, negative experiences, and fears around removal of children from social services. Now, this isn't just a made-up fear; it is based on previous experiences with these services. And I know of a travel girl who was experiencing domestic abuse as well, and she decided to call the police and get a restraining order. But then when she wanted to apply for it, they did say social services is going to have to step in because you have a 6-month-old baby. And she heard the idea of social services. She heard that they were going to get involved, and she withdrew that because she thought the protection they're offering me from him is not worth me losing my baby. Which obviously, as a parent, your number one priority is your child, and traveller women particularly place a lot of importance on family, and their kind of role in the community is to be the caregiver, the mother, the wife. So having that put on you is not very nice. So this is why one of our key recommendations is to ensure that reporting routes are safe and that it's culturally appropriate, and it doesn't punish the women who are reporting the abuse. Women need to be able to seek help without the fear of social services getting involved. And another reason why it may not be reported or why there is another barrier is due to shame and scandal. The fear of having your reputation destroyed in the community is often more scary to the woman than it is than getting abused. So having experience in shame and scandal obviously has affected the woman, her children, the wider community itself, and the wider family. So once a woman's publicly shamed, that damage can kind of follow her for years. So if services do not understand the effect of shame and reputation damage, then they can't adequately support the woman. So one particularly modern form of this is the use of shame pages and social media. So women are publicly named and condemned for perceived wrongdoings. This can include relationship choices, clothing, or even seeking a divorce. Because of this, many women will not report the abuse, will not seek a divorce, and will not leave a violent relationship. A key recommendation is to provide specialist training to frontline professionals. They need to understand the specific forms of abuse affecting these communities, including shame and scandalizing and reputation-based harm, and the ways that the fear of authorities intersects with these. Without this understanding, risk is often missed and women are left unsupported. Women are sometimes told to just leave or go to a refuge, but in reality it's not that simple. Leaving can trigger scandal, family rejection, long-term isolation, and a loss of community. This is why it is important to invest in specialist community-based services led by or working in partnership with Roma, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish Traveller organisations. Until mistrust, shame, and fear are properly understood and addressed, too many women will continue to suffer in silence. The solution is not to provide more refuges. It is to provide culturally informed support, safe reporting routes, and services that women can trust to keep them and their families safe. So yeah.
Thank you, Lords. Okay, so great to hear from you. And we're going to move on to Olivia next. And yeah, just as a reminder, do keep your questions in the Q&A. But yeah, over to you, Olivia.
Thanks. I'm just going to share my screen. Actually, just because I've got a few slides that just might be useful. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see that. Just to kind of run through very, very quickly. We are a national charity working with Romani, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish Traveller communities, as Laws has kind of just said there. And we do a lot of different work. We're very, very small, but we managed to get a lot done. So we work pretty much around research, particularly around education policy, but also criminal justice policy as well. We also do a lot around health and wellbeing, a lot of community advocacy, and supporting community members to access justice. And very, very briefly, and I kind of won't go through it there, but just to kind of say really that we are, when we're sort of talking about Romani, Gypsies, Roma, and Irish Travellers, unfortunately, these communities have often been kind of amalgamated under the umbrella term GRT, which is really kind of a policy term that was sort of given to the community. So you'll kind of notice in more recent years, a lot of organisations have moved away from using that acronym. We moved away from that a few years ago now. Just really to kind of highlight the fact that these are really, really distinct ethnic communities, and each have their kind of distinct histories. So it is just kind of important to note that. But I will just kind of move forward just to the kind of briefing overview and the sort of key recommendations, and just kind of talk through some of the points that we feel are particularly key. And I should also just say, I think this briefing is really important and very well timed as well. I think, we've done quite a lot of reports down the years about kind of the different barriers that women from the communities face across a range of different areas. But to have a kind of a briefing where all of that is sort of included sort of together, I think it's really quite powerful, and it kind of just shows how stark a lot of the the kind of research findings are. So kind of one of the main kind of key points to kind of take away from this briefing is that women and girls from the different communities experience compounded disadvantage at the intersection of ethnicity and gender. We know that Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish Traveller women are hugely underrepresented in national data. So with inconsistent ethnic monitoring and limited gender disaggregation, obviously impeding evidence-based policy development, and that's sort of not just for women, of course. So what's often the case, and what's the kind of current case in terms of sort of data collection, is under the census, for example. So the ONS kind of data terminology. So Romani, Gypsies and Irish Travellers are amalgamated, so they're kind of grouped together. So we really kind of don't know how many Romani, Gypsies or Irish Travellers are living and working here. And then oftentimes, so within education, for example, Romani, Gypsies and Roma are grouped together. So there is just a real understanding at the kind of national kind of data level about the fact that these are very, very different communities. And I know Emma's going to kind of talk through the kind of data point there. Educational barriers, as Lord's touched on there, are really severe. So Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish Traveller girls do have lower attainment and higher exclusion rates. And again, that's true of boys as well within the communities. And I think, as Lord's also kind of touched on, the point about isolation, I think what we've really seen is that a lot of schools, unfortunately, do use disproportionate sort of measures to punish Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish Traveller children. And we've done a lot of work on this in terms of, so we have we've recently published kind of 2 reports on the kind of creation of really hostile environments for Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish Traveller children in education settings. And we call that sort of coercive exclusion. So that's kind of creating an environment that is really hostile for children, and often kind of results in children either kind of dropping out of school or just kind of really making people feel that they're sort of not welcome. And then employment outcomes, only 37.4% of Romani, Gypsy or Irish Traveller adults are economically active, compared with 74.4% of the white British population. And again, that kind of links back to the education point there. We get a lot of calls, particularly from slightly, say, younger adults, those who have been sort of pulled out of school, or for whatever reason they've left school at a younger age, and then are looking to kind of re-engage with education or with say an employment opportunity, but are really stuck because they then don't have the necessary qualifications to kind of to access that. So so that is something that we are really aware of, and particularly for women as well. Health outcomes as well are really stark, and I kind of touched on the data point there earlier, but the NHS Data Dictionary, really, it doesn't include Romani, Gypsy, Roma or Irish Traveller communities, and that's something that we've been campaigning on for decades now, and that means it's really difficult for us, when we know anecdotally that there are real health issues, and particularly around mental health and suicide rates. We know that those are disproportionately high, but it's really difficult for us to get the government to commission sort of tailored support because of the lack of data around that. And then violence against women and girls is massively underreported. And like Lord's rightly said, what we do know is that domestic abuse happens across all communities, and it's not something that happens more so or less so in Romani, Gypsy, Roma, Irish Traveller communities either. And I think that's an important point to make, because often assumptions are made, unfortunately, due to really false assumptions and really poor kind of media portrayals of the communities. But there are massive barriers for those women who are experiencing domestic abuse. It can be really, really difficult to leave that situation. As Lord said, often the fear of kind of being shamed and scandalized for that, for leaving a relationship, but also kind of once you are able to kind of make that step and access support, there can be the barriers there that include just services not really understanding kind of cultural needs. And then in the criminal justice system, so I know Annalise is going to talk through this as well, but Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish Traveller women are significantly overrepresented. Our communities are significantly overrepresented within the criminal justice system, and that's in part due to kind of really punitive and disproportionately kind of punitive policies. So just some of the kind of key recommendations for us. So we really advise kind of mainstream organisations to adopt the ONS 19+1 ethnic monitoring framework across all public bodies as a minimum standard. It's important to caveat this and kind of go back to the point that I mentioned earlier, that the ONS sort of data collection sort of system really combines Romani, Gypsy and Irish Traveller communities, so it's not perfect by any means. What we would like to see would be the kind of complete disaggregation of data. So you would collect data on Romani Gypsies, you collect data on Roma, and then separately on Irish Travellers. Systematically record the reasons for elective home education, including experiences of racism, bullying, and exclusion. Again, to Lords's point there, that's really, really important, just because we know these things are happening, but if they're not recorded properly, it's really difficult for us to kind of be able to make that case to government to show that there is a real issue, that children from Gypsy, Roma and Traveller communities are experiencing extreme disadvantage kind of within mainstream education. We also suggest developing and embedding culturally responsive educational programs in partnership with the communities, and to tailor employment, skills and apprenticeship programs to the needs of Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish Traveller women as well. Provide culturally competent maternity and mental health services, including targeted outreach. I know Annalise is going to get into this as well, but just kind of to the earlier point and to the point about kind of domestic abuse services as well, we know there is a real kind of lack of understanding amongst services about the different cultural needs of the different communities. And so, in order to encourage people to engage with services, those services really do need to be culturally competent. And then to train frontline professionals to recognise and respond appropriately to forms of abuse affecting Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish Traveller women, including shame and reputation-based harms. So we actually published a report towards the end of last year around honour-based abuse within the communities, and that kind of terminology in of itself might not necessarily kind of resonate with a lot of community members, but for us, we included kind of shame and reputation damage as a form of that honour-based abuse. So I would encourage you to take a look at that report as well. And then lastly, kind of these sort of final points to explicitly include Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish Traveller women's experiences within national voice strategies and commissioning frameworks. I know that there was kind of very little mentioned around Black and minoritized women's experiences within the kind of the recent kind of all strategy. But yeah, it would be really important to include Romani, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish Traveller women's experiences as well. And then to mandate pre-sentence reports for women or women with protected characteristics, including Romani, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish Traveller women. So the recent act obviously kind of prevented sentencing guidelines for mandating pre-sentencing reports based on offenders' kind of characteristics. But for us, we really advocate that the pre-sentencing reports are really crucial in giving that information about individuals' characteristics, and that is helpful in understanding kind of the different barriers that individual may have faced and may be experiencing. And then to introduce mandatory cultural competency training across public services, and to target sustained funding to the areas of greatest inequality. I think, a lot of what we've kind of talked through already, and I know what Annalise will kind of be talking to as well, is there is a real need for services that work with kind of Romani, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish Traveller communities to, not only to advocate on behalf of the communities, but to kind of support communities to be able to kind of better advocate for themselves as well. And obviously the travel movement, I can kind of talk through just very, very briefly some of the work that the travel movement does. So we offer a lot of support and signposting. We have a domestic abuse helpline, and we also provide a lot of casework around education advocacy, as well as discrimination. We also deliver a lot of training and consultation. So we work, across sort of different public bodies, providing training, cultural competency training as well. And then we also produce a lot of research and resources. And here is just some of the resources that might be useful or might be of interest. And I'm happy to talk through any of those in the Q&A session as well. So that's it from me, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you, Olivia. Such a lot of rich detail in that presentation. And I'm sure we've got people here, I've seen from the chat, from health services, the violence against women and girls sector, housing association represented, a union. There's lots of people here. So it's great that you are speaking directly, and I'm sure they'd be interested in following up on some of those resources that you've shared as well. So we've got two more speakers, and I'll just say again, in case anyone missed, we were hoping to be joined by the Member of Parliament for the City of Durham, Mary Kelly-Foy MP, who's also the co-chair of the APPG for Gypsies, Travellers and Roma, but unfortunately she's had a bit of an emergency at home and may not be able to join us. But I know she's very supportive of the work that the Traveller Movement do. And so, yeah, I'm sure the recommendations from this latest briefing will feed into that APPG as well. So we have two more speakers, and then there will be time for questions. So I'm going to hand over now to Annalise. Over to you, Annalise. I'm not sure. Sorry, Annalisa, I can't hear you. I'm not sure if your sound is. I can't, but unless it's me, let me just see. You can. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, let me see. Unable. Yeah, so it isn't my sound. Perhaps we could go to Emma, and then Annalisa, if you could have a look at it. It looked like there was some.
I think Annalise is going to hop on to Lords's computer and see if she can access that way.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. Give it a minute.
Sorry about that. We've had really bad tech issues today. Yeah, so just as I was saying, I'm very, very grateful to be a part of this conversation, and
because these issues are very serious and deeply lived by many people within the community. Just to go over, my name is Annalise. I'm an Irish traveller myself, and I was raised on an Irish traveller site in London. I'm the Community Development Officer at the Traveller Movement. I've been working here for almost 2 years now. So my role is basically just to help build bridges between service providers and community members. So that's why I think this is a really important briefing to be talking on. Currently, I'm on a crucial mental health project. So just learning about Romani, Gypsy and Irish travellers' experiences with mental health services. So obviously today I just want to kind of build on what's already been outlined in the briefing and to add weight to it through my own lived experience and professional experience as an Irish traveller woman. So just to kind of go over the key findings on health and social care. So low life expectancy compared to the general public and higher maternal mortalities. This is obviously, as you're aware, and it's been stated in the briefing, due to lack of engagement, but it's very important for service providers and policymakers to understand why there has been a lack of engagement. People haven't distanced themselves from their GPs, pediatricians, mental health, and so on for no reason. It's been years of discrimination and feeling a sense of judgment for their identity and who people are. Just yesterday, we had a focus group on a traveller site in London, and it was around mental health and there was mainly women in the group and their experiences with service providers. And each and every one of them had the same thing to say, that they felt like they were being judged. One woman even stating that she felt like she was being looked down on by her GP and so on. Some of the stuff that we did hear yesterday was shocking. About how some of these women have been treated by their local GPs and other professionals. So yeah, I think it's very important to keep that in mind. Just to kind of, obviously I'm speaking from lived experience rather than exactly from my professional, but another woman brought up yesterday how she has been through a journey with her mental health and addictions to drugs and alcohol, and was very suicidal, and then went to seek help and support from organizations in which they ended up being very judgmental to her, and then she ended up relapsing back into her addictions and tried to commit suicide. Thankfully, she sought help the second time, and this time then she was brought to a woman who she really trusted, and she was able to provide her with the help and support that she needed. It's just basically very important to keep in mind when the organizations and service providers are not culturally competent, this can tend to leave people feeling like they're being interrogated when they're in the meeting. So I've been through situations myself where I went to receive help and support, and it has ended up being where I received the help and support until they figure out that I'm a traveller, and then it turns into a little bit of an interrogation. And so it's asking all these questions about where I come from, what's my story, and it always goes back to situations like my big fat gypsy wedding, which obviously has had a very, very negative impact on the traveller community. I think it's very important for individual data to be collected on each ethnic group so that people and service providers can be culturally trained about travellers, Romani gypsies and Roma people, and distinguish the difference between them and not be, clumping us all together as the one, because obviously that's having a negative impact on when people are desiring to go and get engaged with service providers. I think it's very important to offer culturally competent training to service providers. Like I said, there's nothing worse than trying to receive help and support, but then it turns into an interrogation. It's important also for outreach to continue by offering tailored support. Believe it or not, it does work. Like, for example, for me, it worked when other organizations like Brent Traveller Education Service outreach toward my community. They offered support and education and work, and they got me to a place where I am today, where I'm able to work, and I'm also starting to be a counsellor. So I think it's important to recognise that the support and the help does work, and it's very, very important. Lastly, I just kind of like to say it's important as well to be patient and to build the trust first. Don't expect it to happen overnight, because this has been years and years worth of discrimination. and lack of cultural awareness from services. So obviously it's not going to be something that is dealt with overnight. Just going over to the criminal justice. So obviously, as you're aware, for those of you that have read the briefing, Romani, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish traveller women are significantly overrepresented. All I can say for that it obviously says in the briefing that it's due to over-police and poverty-related offences and so on. As it's obviously stated, I think it's very important to mandate pre-sentence reports for all women within the Romani, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish traveller communities. For example, like a woman could be convicted for theft, but learning about the woman's past and what led her to the place she is now is crucial. Like there has been cases, many cases where young traveller women have not received the education that they need or any qualifications. They've never worked a day in their life, and it's terrifying to them. They may enter into a marriage with an abusive husband that won't allow them to work, but yet won't provide for them either. So they're left in a very sticky and awkward position. So I feel like it's really, really important and vital for to mandate pre-sentence and reports to understand where these women are coming from and not just see them as criminals, because sometimes they have a long history of suffering and trying. And don't get me wrong, I'm not condoning crime, but I'm saying it's very important that you're aware of where these women are coming from. And also, like you've said, deliver culturally competent training for police and so on. I think that's also very important. So that the police can understand where these women are coming from. And instead of giving judgment, it can come from a place of helping them to basically get out of the situations that they're in. And long-term objectives, basically expand and invest in community-based sentencing alternatives to reduce imprisonment of Romani, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish traveller women. And I definitely agree with this. I think this is very, very important. Instead of just sending women into prison, I think it's more important to provide programs that help women get qualifications so they're not in danger of falling back into the same crime over and over again. This would save the government a lot of money and time if they were targeting the main issues within these communities and offering ways out for women. There is a program in Ireland, and it used to be called ANCO, but now it's been changed to FAS. And it's basically just a training program that trains women in different professions, whether it be cooking, hair, makeup, sewing. I know of actually one older woman that lived on the same side as me, who entered FAS, and she was able to get a qualification in sewing and textiles. And to this day now, she still has her own business where she makes and sends clothes to women within the community. And this is the kind of thing that is more effective in the long run, rather than just throwing someone into prison, in which they might end up committing the same crime not long after they get out due to desperation and not knowing what else to do. That's really all I have to say about these matters. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Annalise. I'm glad we got your sound working. That was really great to hear from you. And I am pleased to hand over now to our final speaker, Emma, who worked on the briefing. So I think Emma's going to share some of the kind of specific findings and recommendations from the briefing, and also has some slides to share. And then, as I said, if you can stay until 2, then we have time for Q&A. I know some people will be in your lunch break, and appreciate you being here. We will make a recording of this available, but if you can stay, do. So over to you, Emma, for our final presentation.
Thanks, Erin. I'm just going to share my screen now, so please bear with me. Excuse me. Sorry, can you all see that?
Yes, visible.
Okay. It's not working for me for some reason. Let me just do it again. Okay. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so how have I started at the beginning? So hi everyone, thanks so much for being here. So I led on the WBG side of authoring this report, putting together the all of the amazing research and findings that the traveller movement have been doing over the last decades. To be honest, it's been such a great experience working with and learning from Olivia and her team. So our other speakers have covered really powerfully, I think, some of the key findings from the report and captured the lived experience behind them also really beautifully and importantly. So I'm going to home in on the data and evidence issues highlighted in the briefing and the recommendations that follow from them. So the report obviously goes into much more detail, but the overall goal here is to show that gaps in evidence translate directly into gaps in policy, and therefore why invisibility in data isn't neutral, but actively shapes who's prioritised, who's funded, and who's left out of policy responses. So a core message of the briefing is that policy tends to follow what is visible. So data isn't just descriptive, it's not just bureaucracy, it actively shapes what governments see as a problem and what they respond to. So when Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish traveller women are missing from data, their needs are far less likely to appear in policy priorities, funding allocations, service design. So this invisibility isn't neutral. It contributes to the persistence of inequality by making some harms basically easier to ignore. So there are some key structural reasons why this invisibility persists. So for instance, different public bodies, so like the ONS and the NHS, they collect ethnicity data in different ways, and that makes it difficult to compare or to link data sets. Roma are often excluded as a distinct group or misclassified under broader categories, And even where ethnicity is captured, outcomes are rarely then analysed by gender. So then that obscures women's experiences. So distinct communities are also often aggregated together, masking important differences. Some detail that Olivia went into there as well. So small sample sizes in data are frequently cited as the reason for this sort of aggregation. And we are clear in the report that this is obviously a challenge. However, the overall result of that is a systematic exclusion of some of the most marginalised women from the evidence base that drives policy. So the briefing is clear that small sample size is a methodological challenge, but it can't be an excuse for exclusion. So absence from data is often treated as the absence of a problem overall. So if there isn't hard evidence in the form of data, serious inequalities will stay off the policy agenda and may even get worse if the policies that are made don't account for them. So what do we do? So this is obviously an issue that exists and comes up in multiple research areas. So if we look at social and health research, for example, we can see some pretty standard use of approaches to account for small sample sizes, oversampling, stratified sampling, multi-level modelling, ways to work with smaller groups. Even then, if data sort of remains underpowered because of small sample sizes, good practice is to report effect sizes and uncertainty. So rather than just treating the absence of data as the absence of inequality. So the point is to make uncertainty explicit, and then where possible to supplement using other methods. And that's really where qualitative and community-led evidence can be a really powerful combination alongside quantitative data. So we do need high quality data, and we're sort of justifiably concerned with introducing bias in our research. But we also need to acknowledge that aggregating data, so sort of lumping distinct communities together, can also actually introduce bias by hiding disparities. So from a policy perspective, excluding marginalised women from evidence has real ethical and practical costs. So we do need to acknowledge that there's been important progress more recently. So Olivia mentioned this before, but the ONS 19+1 ethnic monitoring framework, which was used, I think, for the first time in the 2021 census, represents a significant improvement in ethnic monitoring. And it's widely seen as sort of the current gold standard in ethnic monitoring. However, it does still aggregate distinct communities. So while Roma are recorded separately, Romani, Gypsy and Irish traveller communities remain combined under a single category. So greater disaggregation, so recognising Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish traveller as 3 distinct ethnic groups would enable more accurate representation and stronger evidence-based policy making. And that's the approach that we advocate for in the briefing. In health, again, as Olivia mentioned, distinct ethnic categories were more or less completely missing from most NHS data for decades. As again, Olivia said, something that they campaigned on for decades and have only quite recently started to be introduced. Alongside this, and I think this has been captured so powerfully by Lords and Annalise, there's a very real mistrust from communities that's been shaped by histories of over surveillance and like punitive data use, and addressing that requires a lot of transparency, clear safeguards, GDPR compliance, and like really actual meaningful involvement of communities in how data is collected and used, and sort of on the flip side, importantly, what data is not used for. So our core recommendation in the briefing around data and evidence is a practical one. So as a minimum, we say that all public bodies should adopt the ONS 19+1 framework with consistent gender disaggregation. But the briefing also makes a case for moving further towards recognising Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish traveller communities as distinct ethnic groups in data collection. So this would materially improve the quality of evidence and enable more targeted, effective policy responses. And also clear differentiation from non-ethnic traveller groups is also essential to avoid misdirected or ineffective interventions. So the briefing also sets out some clear priority actions. Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish traveller women and children must be included in maternal and child health monitoring programmes, including national reviews such as Embrace UK. New pupil registers should be GDPR compliant, deleted at age 18 and protected from discriminatory use. Dedicated research on intersecting inequalities is also needed. And where sample sizes are small, qualitative and community-led evidence should be treated as essential and not secondary. So to conclude, this isn't about data for its own sake. It's not about bureaucracy. Invisibility in evidence drives inequality in policy. When groups are missing from data, it becomes easier, basically, to overlook their experiences and deprioritize their needs. Better data makes inequalities visible, it strengthens accountability, and it supports policies that are more effective and fair. So finally, crucially, data collection must be designed to reduce harm, build trust, and work really closely with and alongside Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish traveller communities, rather than repeating the exclusions of the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. And if I could ask all our speaker panel to turn your videos back on now. I think really powerful kind of evidence and testimony from all of you. And I know we've got lots of questions, so there's lots of interest. But yeah, to me, it came across very clearly. I mean, there's lots of rich evidence and recommendations in that briefing, so do read it. But yeah, this kind of the that Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish travellers are really distinct ethnic groups and communities is really clear, and that hasn't been recognised. And the need for cultural competency and trust building have really come across as kind of key things that we need to focus on. And I wonder, I think there was a question actually in the chat, Annalise, about, you spoke about some outreach that supported you. And I wondered if you could just expand on that a little bit. I think someone in the audience missed it, and I didn't catch it completely as well, but it seemed like a good example of a service that did have cultural competency. And I wonder from others of you if there's any other examples of kind of services or sectors that have done that effectively from your experience. So Annalise, would you mind just
Yeah, sure. So it was called ANCO, and it's been changed now to FAS, AFAS. And it was a program in Ireland. I think it continues now, but it was definitely going on a couple of years ago. But I know it continues now.
Could you say any more about what they did or what your experience was?
I personally wasn't working. I haven't used it myself, but I know friends and family that have used it. So living on the site, I had an older woman who had no qualifications and stuff like that, but then entered into the program in which she taught her all about textiles and sewing, and that ended up leading her to open up her own business of clothes making, which she made and provided clothes for other travel people, and that's how she ended up kind of making her income. So yeah, it ended up helping her to get a qualification, in which then she was able to kind of get her own employment. Yeah, so that's what I've heard of other stories as well of women who've done other courses, I think like hair and beauty and other stuff like that have really helped them.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And anyone else, any examples you could give of where services have done kind of outreach well?
I mean, yeah, I know Annalise also spoke earlier about a lot of the education services, and there used to be a lot of travel education services. Unfortunately, due to funding cuts, a lot of those are now gone. So whereas before there used to be kind of a lot of sort of outreach, there just doesn't seem to be kind of that available, unfortunately. However, there are kind of examples of good practice, definitely. So we work very closely with the Westway Trust, and they do support one of the sites in London, so the site near Latimer Road, and they have a wonderful support service, particularly for the younger children on the site. It's kind of an after school club, and I know that kind of makes the world of difference to those children's lives. Unfortunately, I know that that's a really rare case. I know that's not the case for a lot of sites in London, and definitely not something that's common, unfortunately, anymore. But yeah, like I say, there are those examples of good practice, and I think ourselves as well at the Travel Movement, and this is something that Lords leads on, but with our Women's Empowerment Network, we're very aware of the different barriers that a lot of our service users have faced, and so we do tend to kind of run different kind of opportunities throughout the year for women to kind of gain qualifications. So in the summer, we ran 2 eyelash courses, for example, for women, and that enabled those who kind of wanted to kind of work from home and set up their own eyelash kind of business to be able to kind of do that, and they had the qualification as well. So where we can, we do, but again, it kind of comes back to funding, and kind of really just illustrates kind of everything that sort of Lords and Annalise have really kind of said, is that that we can do a lot more, but we need the funding, and we need to be able to kind of provide that.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to come in on that one? Happy to move on if not. Okay. I can see lots of engagement in the chat, so that's great. Yeah, do keep posting your comments and questions. There's a couple of questions asking for the slides. I think the content is mostly based on the research briefings and the resources that Olivia shared, which we will definitely share. Speakers can decide if they want us to share the slides, but we will share all of the resources, and the stats and recommendations on those slides are in the report. So you will have access to that. We'll make sure you all get that after this. There's a couple of people who have asked a similar question, who are working on genomics, which is about how health information passed down in families can sometimes help with finding answers, preventing illness, and giving the right care, including things like women's health and cancer screening. The person asking says, we know that talking about conditions that run in families can sometimes link to stigma, shame, or personal or faith beliefs. So thinking about the kind of inequalities that you've described, where do you think women might be missing out on this kind of support? And how do you think we could talk about genomics, and family health in a way that feels respectful and comfortable? Who would like to take that one?
I'm happy to take that, and maybe if Annalise and Lords want to kind of come in on that as well after. But I think for us, and what we kind of say with any kind of the health outreach that we would do, or any outreach, to be honest, is a lot of the time, trust has to be built. And I think oftentimes where services go wrong is, they have certain topics that they would like to discuss. They don't know necessarily how, and they might kind of sort of launch into it, and maybe kind of the language being used might not be appropriate, or it might just kind of come across in a way that is a little bit intimidating. So for us, our kind of role, and we're not alone. We there are a lot of I shouldn't say there's a lot, there's maybe 5 Gypsy and traveller organisations across the country. Many of them are very local, but they all do amazing work. But a lot of the work that we would do as an organisation is acting as an intermediary between services and communities. And like Annalise was saying, that's a big part of Annalise's role there. So I would say services, if you're kind of not entirely sure how to engage, you're better off kind of linking up with an organisation like the Travel Movement, or a similar organisation in your local area, and having the conversation, and looking at, is it the language, how might you best approach it, and again, it kind of comes back to the fact that as well, because we're working with different communities, so Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish traveller communities, you can't sort of do a broad brush approach. You really need to be aware of the different communities that you're working with, so you can tailor that support to that community. So that would be my advice. I don't know, Annalise and Lords, if you've got any other suggestions.
I agree with everything Olivia just said. And even just to kind of go off on that, if there was more opportunities for training for these organisations and services, I think that would be great. Because even for me as an Irish traveller, I had to learn about Romani, Gypsy and Roma people, because we're different, distinct ethnic groups. So I didn't automatically know about these communities. And I think it could save a lot of stress and hassle if people were a little bit more aware, culturally aware, before they kind of over interact with these communities. You don't have to know completely all the roots and all the history, but just even to know the basics, I think it would be very good. And instead of maybe enforcing questions on people, which can come across as very intimidating, just kind of like Olivia was saying, just build trust. Let trust be built and be patient. And hopefully as time goes on, people will start to trust you more and you start to open up to you, but it's not something that you can force. It's something that you kind of have to let come naturally, and it takes time. So yeah.
Thank you. We have a question from Honey Alma, who has asked about the link between the high proportion of care experienced and traveller women in the criminal justice system, and is there a link between traveller women being care experienced and experiencing the criminal justice system?
So I don't know whether we have data on that, but what I would say is, in general, we do know that those who have been involved in the care system are disproportionately more likely to be involved in the criminal justice system. I think there's definitely scope for a piece of research around that, and that's definitely something that we could look into. We kind of hope to kind of build on this work, but yeah, Emma, maybe I would better able to answer that.
No, not better able at all. But yeah, just on that point, on that question, I saw there are a couple of other questions in the chat about kind of even sort of more disaggregated communities. So looking at LGBTQ plus communities within traveller communities as well. And I think that sort of comes back to the data point as well. So as sort of Olivia was saying, we do know from sort of community evidence that those things there are sort of huge inequalities there. We also know about the effect of sort of compounding inequalities, so we know sort of individually about inequalities that specifically affect traveller communities, that affect women, that affect those with care experience, etc. We don't have good official data on that that can sort of be used to drive policy. So again, as Olivia just said, that's sort of almost like a good sort of next step is to sort of develop research that is able to sort of really look into distinct communities to see where those sort of data gaps are, and to start to fill them. And again, as has been said, really sort of picking up on that mistrust point, working directly with those affected, those communities from the very beginning of research design, even before any sort of research is done, to see what that looks like, how that can be done and used in a non sort of punitive or discriminatory way.
I wonder if I could just kind of come in here and just kind of say, I'm not sure who's on the call, but just to really reiterate the point that this is the point of this briefing is kind of pull all of the information together and really kind of show where there are huge gaps and what needs to be done. So we would definitely welcome anyone who would like to kind of partner with us and the Women's Project Group on kind of developing this work, because I think we've got a good basis here, and I think it would be really important to kind of develop whilst we have this momentum. So I can put my email in the chat later as well.
I think there would be lots of interest, Olivia, in that, though. Yeah, that would be great. And if you're happy, we can share contact details for people to get in touch as a kind of post-event follow-up email. So we'll ensure people get those details. I just wondered on that point around the experiences of LGBTQ plus women within the traveller community, whether Lourdes or Annalise wants to come in. There's no requirement, but I just wondered if you had any reflections. And I guess that, again, like that those organizations that work specifically with and for those communities also, understanding and recognizing, building that trust with these communities is the kind of first step. Great. So I think that may be many of the questions. I did see there's one in the chat from Francis Norris, picking up mistrust on data use and gaps in evidence. Is there a tendency to hide ethnicity? And is there more accurate information about the location and makeup of Romani, Gypsy, Roma and Irish traveller communities than the official data? And I would just follow up on that and say, I'd be interested in your experiences, Olivia and Lourdes and Annalisa, of kind of engagement with, I guess, policymakers or public figures, whether this is also something that people don't tend to disclose or talk about when they have a public profile, whether there's any kind of, both in terms of their own experiences, lobbying on behalf of or working on behalf of those communities when they do have positions that enable them to. And we probably need to make that the last question.
I'm happy to kind of take this. I think generally speaking across the board, it's most people's experience that you do not declare your identity and your ethnicity out of fear of being of discrimination. That's definitely something that I know from my own personal experience. And I'm of heritage. I'm not kind of actively within the communities, but I know it's the same for people who are kind of still within the communities actively. So that the advice often parents will give is do not kind of tell people at school that you're an Irish traveller or a Romani Gypsy, and that's really kind of ingrained from a young age. So I think it's very, very difficult then to yes, it's kind of outwardly then to kind of come out and say that you are a member of those communities. I think things are changing. I'm really kind of glad to see. I know when we were on a site yesterday, some of the parents we spoke to were kind of saying that they would like for their children to kind of self-identify because it is important, and they should be proud of their heritage and their communities. Unfortunately, it is a protection kind of mechanism. It is really kind of for children's protection that parents would say something like that. But it is definitely something we know is true. And in terms of kind of public figures as well, again, I think there are a lot of people out there who probably do have ties to the different communities, but may be reluctant to kind of speak out and self-identify because of that fear. And I know, even within our own organisation, our chair of our organisation, who is an Irish traveller, it took her kind of several kind of decades in her professional career to kind of outwardly kind of be able to come out and say that she was an Irish traveller. And it was only at the point where she felt that she was sort of successful enough to be able to kind of say that without there being repercussions. So I think that's just something to think on as well, that it is definitely whilst I do hope and I do think things are starting to change, there is that real history and that legacy of not disclosing. I don't know if Lords and Annalise wanted to add to that.
Well, my own experience, I went the whole way through primary school, high school, sixth form, and uni, and not once did I put a form saying that I was an Irish traveller. In fact, when I went to a sixth form, which was a Catholic sixth form, and I thought, when I applied for the sixth form, I thought, I'm not going to put myself down as a traveller just in case they don't let me in. So I ticked white British to get into the school. And then even it was different with uni because I knew I had an advantage because I spoke to someone at my high school who I was still in contact with, one of the teachers, and she advised me, you are more likely to get into university if you use your ethnicity, as because they all have to have a certain amount of different ethnicities in the university. So I thought, rather than putting myself and labeling myself as white British, let me put myself down as a traveller, and then did my whole personal statement thing about being a traveller and stuff like that. And I did get in, but I don't know, to this day, I don't know whether it's because I actually was academically smart and I got into uni because of that, or whether it was because I had to tick a tick box. I don't know. But the whole way through high school and that, I did kind of only reveal to certain friends and would kind of keep certain friends away from my home just in case they judged me for, like, I don't know, having a trailer on the driveway or whatever. So yeah, so it was very I kind of hid it and then kind of kept it more. And then when people did find out I was a traveller, they were like, "Oh, you're a nice traveller, you're this," and then all the stereotypes came coming in. So it was kind of just best to avoid it. So yeah.
Thank you. Annalise, do you want to add anything?
No, I don't think I have to add too much, to be honest. Personally, my own experience is, well, I haven't really publicly come out and said I was an Irish traveller. I became more comfortable when I started working for the traveller movement. It was a little bit hard to deny it. I would never deny that I was a traveller, but I would just kind of avoid bringing it up because, like I mentioned before, a few times in cases where people didn't realise I was a traveller, it was very like we get to see connection and stuff, and then the minute they realise my ethnicity is like question after question, because apparently they have a grandmother who has a cousin who has a friend that knew a traveller, and then it's like all this questions start happening, and it would always end up to the negative, the stereotype. So I did avoid it as much as I could. But now lately, since working at the traveller movement and since realising that that's actually not appropriate, I don't have to put up with that, I'm a little bit more comfortable now, letting people know about my ethnicity, because I know I have my own boundaries that I won't allow people to pass. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I know that we and the audience in the chat as well have really appreciated you sharing your own experiences. So thank you for that. But not only your experiences, your expertise and knowledge. So yeah, just thank you so much to each of you. Olivia, Annalise, Lords and Emma are fantastic speakers. Thank you to the audience for being so engaged. Brilliant question. It's lovely to see people from so many different kind of areas of work where these communities will come into contact. So please do read the report, share the recommendations, share them with people you know. We'll send a link to this video, so share this too. I think just it's useful at this to get as much information out there as possible, and do follow up. If you do want to do some work either on the research side or the kind of training and cultural competency side. But I think that's it for us. So thank you all again, and we'll see you at the next event.